All right, so this third one that I wanted to share, it's this one is not really a tool yet, and I'm not sure if it would be a good idea to turn this into some kind of a tool. And when I first stumbled upon this, it seemed like there's actually even like no need to see this as a tool, because there's very little you need to do when this works on its own. But sometimes it doesn't, so we might need to come up with a tool how to get even more out of this. And really, the first time I came up with this was like, this seemed like the holy grail of inquiry. It just seemed to fix everything just like that. And hold on. Yep, sorry about that. That was I'm on an island and we don't have electricity here apart from a solar power system, which started to. I was putting too much power from that. Anyway, I turned that off. I have a battery on enough, so we can continue. And as I was saying, yeah, so we might need to turn this into a tool, and the basic concept is really simple, and it's you could say that it's like deviously simple, and yeah, so to jump right in, the whole idea of this process is to make a clear distinction between the external circumstances that we have in our lives and our thoughts and emotions related to those external circumstances, and that's all. And it might seem like that, like, yeah, of course there's a distinction there, but the thing is that oftentimes the distinction isn't that clear, and the like, because the distinction isn't clear, that oftentimes causes a lot of confusion. And what I noticed when I started using this was that really oftentimes when I would be really disturbed by something, and then I would just look at the situation and make the distinction between, okay, these are the external circumstances and these are my thoughts and emotions related to those, and simply making that distinction would unravel and completely resolve the not only the confusion but also the charge and the problem that I had with that situation. And you can really mess this up both ways. So you can look at the situation and try and fix everything like externally, and that I would say is what most people do before they learn some type of inquiry. So it's like when you have a conflict situation with someone, you're always blaming the other person, and it's only when you learn either inquiry or do some kind of cognitive therapy where you get in touch with your own emotions and your own beliefs and see how that is, how your own interpretations of that situation are creating the problem that you're experiencing. And yeah, so up until that point, we are usually trying to fix everything on the external. Whereas when we learn inquiry, it seems that quite often we go to the other extreme and try and fix everything through inquiry or other method where we're just working on the internal stuff and only working on our beliefs and interpretations and emotions, and blaming ourselves for everything that we are experiencing. That's when we don't feel good, when in fact the problem can be on the external. So I'll try and come up with some good example of this. Yeah, okay. So one thing that I noticed one of the first times that I was doing this, I was feeling anxious, and I was doing relaxations, like doing natural rest, and trying to solve things in my mind, and feeling like there's something wrong with me, one of my core deficiency stories, and also feeling like I have to do something about the anxious mode that I was in. And at first I was instinctively doing that only through inquiry, and it would help a little, but it wouldn't like really resolve until I started doing this, and I started looking at the situation, and like consciously made the distinction between, okay, these are the external circumstances, and these are the my thoughts and emotions about these circumstances. And what I realized when I was looking at that situation and making that distinction, what I realized was that actually a lot of the problem was actually on the external side. So what I noticed was that what I wanted to do, instead of being stuck doing inquiry and being kind of in this loop of dwelling on my emotions, what I actually wanted to do was stop doing that and go for a walk, or to do any of the things that were actually troubling me in my life at that point. And since then I've done this a number of times, and oftentimes it's been like making that distinction has enabled me to see that, okay, this is what I've been trying to avoid in my like actual day-to-day life, and started to clean up my apartment, or made a phone call, or whatever that might be. Whereas doing inquiry and just trying to fix things on the external side has been kind of my way of avoiding doing those simple practical things on the external. So you can really mess this up both ways, and that's kind of the devious part in this, that it seems obvious, and then when you start to look at that and try and make that distinction, it's actually not always so clear, and oftentimes we feel like, oh, of course that's like such a clear difference between those two. But then when you start really looking into that, you might notice that okay, it's not such a clear thing anyway, like after all. And one example is our bodies and our nervous system and things like that. So are those external things or internal thoughts and emotions? And I would say those are actually external circumstances. Like if our nervous system is really wound up, then what we really want is to calm that nervous system down, and whether that's through doing some type of inquiry or a relaxation, or doing something externally like going for a walk or whatever, to help calm down that nervous system, then that is what we need to do in order to feel better. But the tricky part here is that our emotions and thoughts obviously have a great impact on our nervous system, and our nervous system has an impact on our thoughts and emotions and interpretations of the reality. So it's really not always so clear cut. And the reason why I was so hyped up about this in the beginning was that the first few times that I tried this, everything just resolved by looking at that and looking at that distinction, and and yeah, making that distinction in my mind and seeing that, okay, this is the external stuff and these are those. And sometimes what would happen was, I'm going to give another example, which was I had been doing this for a couple of days at that point, and then there was a situation in my relationship where I got really triggered, and this has been something that has been coming up quite a few times already. And when I was triggered again, I was on the phone with my girlfriend, and she said something that triggered me. And at first I was disappointed that, okay, now this like emotional stuff started coming up again, like darn, it didn't work anymore. The making that distinction didn't work anymore. And then I figured that like, let's give it one more chance. Like I would have another look at that distinction, and what I noticed was like there wasn't anything in that phone call that was showing me that there would be anything at all wrong in my relationship with my girlfriend. Like absolutely nothing at all. And still I was feeling crappy. I was still feeling triggered. So what I noticed from that is that the experience that I was having and the triggered state I was getting in was obviously on the other side. It was on the internal side of thoughts and emotions. And as I said, at first I thought that, okay, darn, this didn't work, because I can see that it's on that side, and still I'm not feeling better. But what I did next was I recognized that okay, those thoughts, those emotions are coming up from my beliefs and interpretations, and also understood that, okay, it might take a moment for those to calm down. And that's exactly what I did. So after acknowledging that these are the external circumstances and these are my emotions, I allowed those emotions to be there exactly as we would do when we're doing natural rest or KI. And it probably took a minute or two for those to fade away and resolve. Like not only fade away, but the whole situation resolved. And the way it resolved was not having pushed anything aside, but thanks to having made that distinction to begin with, that there's nothing to worry about on the external stuff, that like there's nothing I need to do to make a relationship better, like externally. There's like, I don't need to call her back and tell her how I'm feeling, like tell her that she's done something wrong or anything like that, because as I was looking at that, it was clear to me that there's absolutely nothing wrong on that respect, and that it's only a question of me getting triggered because of my beliefs and interpretations. And I think it was thanks to having made that distinction that it was possible for those emotions to calm down and quiet down without doing any like elaborate inquiry stuff where you go and look at all the associations and look at all the words and images and any of that. So that was another really good experience from having made that distinction. And one thing that I really like about this is it works almost instantly. So quite often it's all you need to do is just make that distinction and that's it. But the trouble is that doesn't always work. So I've now had a few situations where I've tried doing this. So I have tried to, like, first of all, I've been triggered by something, being emotionally upset, and then looked at that distinction. And the trouble has been that I haven't been able to make that distinction. So it's like, even though I'm trying to figure out, okay, this one is the external circumstances, and these parts of the situation are my thoughts and emotions, that distinction just doesn't become clear necessarily. And that's where I'm thinking about if it might be possible to turn this into some kind of tool that would help make that distinction. And the fact that it's challenging to make that distinction does not mean at all that being able to make the distinction would not be beneficial. So I've been doing this for a while now, for a few weeks, and every time that I've been able to make that distinction, the situation has resolved. So if you're able to do that, it's fantastic. But the challenge is in being able to make that distinction. So I would say that the kind of the theory or the basis of this process is completely solid. That the like really often the culprit is having a messed up understanding of, like, having those things messed up, the external and the internal, and being able to separate those clears up things. But how to do that when it's not apparent by simply looking at that? So so first of all, do try that out. Like, that's the first thing. Whenever you, like, the next time you notice being triggered or find yourself in a tricky situation, see if you can make that distinction and see if it resolves from that. And another thing is, I would really like to get your input and ideas on how to develop this further, so that we could actually make it easier for people to make that distinction. Yeah, that's all for now. I know this was a bit of a long and winding video, this last one, so I'm happy that I did 3 separate ones and not one really long one. I'm really happy to be part of this community, and I've just gotten so much out of the facilitator training and doing the trades and KILAB inquiries in general, that I'm really thankful for everything, and really happy to be able to share things and give something back to the community. So thank you for watching, and let's continue the discussion. Bye bye.